Hello, and welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast, where we learn about the ocean, share sea stories, and explore ocean careers. I'm your host, Kara Muzia. Let's dive into today's episode. Hey, do you want to dive more into the ocean and marine biology? Need a little guidance on ocean conservation? Head on over to marinebio.life/resources. We've got book recommendations, job posting pages, conference suggestions, and ocean-friendly products. All recommendations have been personally vetted by me, and I will continue to add to the collection as I come across cool things to share. Head on over to marinebio.life/resources to learn more. See you over there. This episode is brought to you by you. Thank you to those of you who have become patrons of the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast. For less than the cost of a dive tank refill or a cup of coffee, you can help keep the podcast episodes coming. There's also some fun bonuses for patrons, so be sure to check those out at patreon.com/marinebiolife. That's patreon.com/marinebiolife. Hello, mermaids, pirates, ocean lovers, and land lubbers. Welcome to today's show. Question: did you hear about the guy who wouldn't eat Atlantic cod? He had a Pacific taste in seafood. What did the fisherman say to the magician? Pick a cod, any cod. My guest today is Harri Pettitt-Wade. Harri is an aquatic animal biologist and ecologist based in Canada, with research primarily focused on fish movement, trophic ecology, species interaction, and response to novel or rapidly changing environments. All this is a really fancy way to describe his work monitoring fish patterns and their implications with climate change, and spending time at camp tagging whales. We have a fun conversation today covering topics ranging from tropical sharks to Arctic fish and even narwhals. Harri has some great insights into what sustainable fishing really looks like and has an incredible field story and answer to the blank check question. So be sure to stay tuned for those. Please enjoy. Harri, welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Hello, yes, I'm excited too.
How did you get into marine biology?
So I grew up in the UK, surrounded by water, and every summer I used to go on holiday to Pembrokeshire, which is in South Wales, and I spent a lot of time on boats and looking around in rock pools and wondering what was beneath the waves. That really got me interested in biology. Then I did a project for my A-levels, which is when I was about 18, a project on whales, and that got me super excited, so I applied for marine biology at universities around the UK.
What kind of whales were you looking at in your project?
You know, it was quite a broad project. I was just describing them in general. So, yeah, I could go anywhere I wanted with it, but I focused on baleen whales.
Interesting.
As opposed to tooth whales.
Right. So why baleen over tooth?
I think it was the size factor. At the time, I was just interested in the fact that blue whales are just the biggest thing that's ever existed, and I was interested to learn more about that, why that's the case, even though they eat some of the smallest things.
Right, the biggest creature on Earth eats some of the smallest creatures on Earth. It's amazing.
It was incredible.
Yeah, so this project kind of was the jump-off point for you to applying to universities. So you knew right away that you wanted to study marine science when you were going to university. Did you have a specific field in mind, or were you just like, ocean, give me anything?
Yeah, I was pretty open to it when I started, to any kind of inspiration. A lot of people who do marine biology think that you're going to spend your time riding dolphins, or that you're just going to be focused on the very charismatic, super exciting animals. But I was open to inspiration from all, because I get excited by really tiny animals as well. I think I just am interested in the whole, which has led to where I am now, which is I study ecology. But field trips I went during my undergrad really inspired me, where we were just sent off to go and find a study topic out there in the water.
What was that like? You're just part of a class and the professor's like, come up with a topic, Did you have like a set planned field trip that was like, we're going to go to the beach or are you in a boat and kind of creating a project from that?
We didn't go on a boat for any of the field trips I did. I went to the Algarve in Portugal for one, and to Roscoff in France. Yeah, both of those were by the beach, so we were essentially looking at the intertidal, or in the Algarve there were mud flats there, so a lot of people studied the crabs, the fiddler crabs that came out of their burrows waving their big claw. But yeah, essentially when we got there, they said, okay, go and find a project. And we worked in groups and then we presented on it. That was the major theme. There were other set parts of the curriculum, but those are the parts I remember that were inspiring.
Yeah. So what did your project end up being on? The fiddler crabs?
No, we got rained out when I was there, so it ended up being on the feeding rate of barnacles. So we collected different barnacles, and then we observed them. We counted the amount of times that they stuck out their feeding apparatus, depending on the conditions in the water.
So you just watch barnacles. That would be actually very meditative, I would think.
Yes, quite a humbling experience. But it makes you realize that marine biology isn't just what big things eat, and it's also the little guys have a massive role to play. And there's a real sort of shortage, I think, of marine biologists to study things that aren't so charismatic.
Yeah, and you can kind of see why, but I feel like there's so many people that are fascinated by the tide pools, like you were, right? I mean, they are mesmerizing. I've definitely sat for at least an hour just watching anemones and barnacles move in tide pools because it's like almost hypnotizing.
Yeah, exactly. And with photography now, like everybody's got a crazy high power camera on their phone, so you can look at things in incredible detail.
Yeah, that's true too. Which university did you graduate from for your undergrad?
University of Plymouth.
Okay. Did you know you wanted to get your PhD after that?
No, I wasn't sure when I left, but I was fortunate that I had a couple of very inspiring supervisors or mentors there at the university, and they helped me get a scholarship for a master's. So I went on to do a master's in applied fish biology, which was heavily focused on sustainable fisheries and aquaculture practices. Yeah, but the research project actually ended up being on the nutritional requirements of lemon sharks, which was super exciting. And that's what made me decide, okay, I want to get a PhD after this.
Okay. Yeah, so I saw your lemon shark project and it was really fun because all of your research now is in very cold climates. But your lemon sharks was done in the Bahamas, which is a huge change from the UK even. So could you tell a little bit about what that project was and some of the findings from it?
Yes, that project built on a lot of work that was done by people before I arrived as a master's student. So Steve Newman, a postdoc, at the time when I arrived, he did his PhD on it, and he collected an enormous amount of samples that depicted the diet of lemon sharks in Bimini in the Bahamas. And they allowed for comparison between wet and dry seasons and impacted and less impacted sites of the island. I analyzed those samples for the nutritional and trace element content. So then we figured out what these sharks were getting on a day-to-day basis and provided that information just like you would see on the side of on a food packet for what kind of nutritional intake you could get from what you're eating.
What were you finding? I mean,
Hey, Kara here. I hear it all the time. How do I become a marine biologist? Or my niece wants to help the ocean. Where does she even start? I hear from students, yes, and also nurses, HR professionals, and other mid-career folks who wonder if they could still make their dream of working with sea turtles or sharks come true, wondering if it's too late to answer the ocean's call. Here's what I've learned after 20 years in the field and hundreds of interviews. There's no straight line, no magic degree, and no gatekeeper. You create the path forward. If this sounds overwhelming and vague, I've created 2 tools to help you stop wondering what if and start moving forward with clarity and purpose. The first is my free guide, Be a Marine Biologist Without the Degree. Over 1,000 people have already downloaded this guide and taken their first step towards ocean impact. Inside, you'll find 7 concrete, doable actions to help you get started, whether you're just exploring or ready to make a change. Then there's the Ocean Blueprint. This is a 30-day self-paced course that helps you build your unique path into ocean science and conservation without quitting your job or going back to school. Inside the Ocean Blueprint, you'll get daily prompts to explore your interests, skills, and next steps, a structure that turns overwhelm into real momentum, and a bonus section to root your work into ocean connection. You don't have to wait for a degree, a perfect plan, or permission. Whether you're wading in or ready to take the deep dive, these tools are here to help you move from dreaming to doing. The ocean called. Are you ready to answer? Links in the show notes and on my website, karagracemuzia.com. I can't wait to see the waves you'll make.
Lemon sharks eat fish, right? They don't eat, and they don't eat shellfish, do they?
No, they do. Yeah, they eat crabs as well. Crustacean. Yeah.
Okay.
Quite a large portion of their diet is juvenile lemon sharks.
Okay.
And so what we found was they were getting a decent amount of energy in their diet, but they may have been deficient in some trace elements. It's often ignored, that aspect of the nutritional intake of wild animals, the importance of micronutrients as opposed to just energy intake. Yeah, is also equally important, and it was interesting to go into that much depth in terms of the nutritional value of what they're getting from different prey items, and how that might change with changes in prey availability with warming oceans.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So lemon sharks were eating these creatures that they're adapted to eat, right? And that traditionally eat, but they're still finding, or you found that while they're getting enough energy to kind of sustain growth, they were deficient in certain micronutrients. Okay, so like basically you're kind of like a shark nutritionist, but you can't write like a prescription for it and be like, hey shark, like, okay, so you're deficient in these nutrients. Can you please take this supplement, right? Like what's the solution for that? Is it just like prey item availability based on like ocean conditions?
Yeah, I think the cautious advice is on maintaining sustainable fisheries so we don't overfish the prey that are available for apex predators in the ocean. Okay. That helps sustain resilient ecosystems and food webs.
Okay. You said they eat a lot of crabs, which I didn't realize. Makes sense, though. Was there traditionally a fish that was more available and then it just is less available and that's kind of why they're deficient? Was that something that the research looked at all, or somebody else's research that complemented yours looked at?
No, there hasn't been a huge amount of research building on this yet, but they fed on the most abundant fish that was available. That was clear, and that was like what we'd sort of expect from what we've seen in other studies as well. Yeah. But it wasn't so expected that they would supplement their diet so much with these. The crabs helped with the trace elements. What has happened in Bimini since that study is there's been huge development in the north of the island. There's been some studies on the potential impact of that, but there's yet to be more in-depth research in terms of the nutritional changes in nutritional value of the prey.
Interesting. Okay. The micronutrient level of the sharks in Bimini, TBD. So what was it like? What was it like flying into the Bahamas as a grad student from the UK? Like, what was your field experience like? What were your living conditions like?
That's a really good question. Unfortunately, not one I can answer because I didn't get to go. I still haven't been to the Bahamas. And it's an important lesson for any prospective marine biologists out there, or biologists or ecologists, that you don't always get to go to your field locations. Sometimes you get given samples. And there's lots of people who have samples ready to process for any willing undergraduates.
That is a really good lesson. And it's super common, right? Because it's really expensive to send people out into the field to collect the data. And so if you can collect a data, and then if a few people can collect data and then share it with a bigger audience, that's the most effective use of resources. So that makes total sense. But as a grad student, you're like, oh, but don't I actually be there in person, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a benefit. of the researcher to see, the environment that you're studying, the ecosystem and the species within it. There's been so much study on Bimini in the Bahamas with the research station there. There's a lot of literature, photography, video footage that I was able to see that helped. It is still on my list to go visit someday. I've had lots of other field experience though, thankfully.
Yeah. So let's chat a little bit about that. So you get your master's. Now, were you able to get in the field like at all during your master's? Obviously, Bimini Bahamas didn't happen, but did other field experiences happen?
Because I didn't get to go to Bimini, I worked I volunteered for a company called Operation Wallacea in Honduras. Yeah, so I got to go to Honduras for a month or so. And I helped with other undergraduate projects during that time and some PhD projects doing reef surveys, and I was diving the whole time. So I think it kind of made up for me not being able to go to the Bahamas.
Yeah. So you're doing reef surveys in Honduras. That sounds incredible. Yeah. That's some of the best diving.
Yeah, it was a very inspiring time for sure.
Now, when you graduated with your master's, like you had an idea that was you're going to go for a PhD. Did you go right away or did you take some time off and work for a little bit?
I took some time away from it to sort of reassess. And I tried to continue the research that I was doing for my master's. But unfortunately, we weren't successful in getting funding for that. As a sort of another life lesson that happens a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for every successful funding application, there's a whole amount of unsuccessful ones that no one hears about. Yeah, so I applied for PhDs elsewhere when I sort of gave up on that, on continuing that track, and just explored what else I was interested in. And I got accepted for a couple in Canada on invasive species. And that's how I ended up over here.
Very cool. Now, why Canada and why invasive species?
Canada was just because of the topic, I think, as the topic was the main reason why I travel anywhere, essentially, to study it. I found the ecology and evolution aspect of invasive species very interesting. Invasive species are like an unplanned evolution experiment.
I don't think I've heard it put like that, but you're 100% correct. An unplanned evolution experiment. Yes.
What happens when you put a species in a new location? How does it respond to that environment? With invasive species, if they've already established, you're looking at that once it's already taken place, but it's taken place recently, whereas opposed to other animals in the natural environment, it's taken a very long time for them to get to that point.
Right.
I found that very interesting, and then also the application of understanding more about invasive species can help us manage ecosystems and maintain their stability and biodiversity.
So what were some of the invasive species that you were looking at?
We looked at pairs of successful and less successful invasive species that were otherwise similar. So the focus was on fish, on gobies, on the round goby and the tube-nosed goby that successfully established in the Great Lakes and spread widely throughout North America.
Where did it come from?
It came from over in the Black Sea area. Yeah, and I was actually lucky enough to go over and sample from the native region, from the Black Sea area, which was an incredible time. Yeah, and they were introduced via ballast water in ships. Yeah. And we actually went to the port where it's suspected the main propagules, the main invasion events stemmed from.
Site 0.
Yeah, Site 0. So it was a very interesting place.
Yeah. Okay, I have so many questions about this. Okay, so invasive species, I learned about this, I was in high school, and it like boggles my mind that one, these animals can just like get sucked up by these ships' ballast waters and get transported halfway across the world, get dumped into other waters and survive. And not only survive, they become an issue. Well, they can become an issue.
Yes.
Like zebra mussels is like the first thing that pops in my mind, especially in the Great Lakes in the US. It's still a problem. Right. So, but when you think gobies, gobies are like cute, tiny little fish. They're like 2-3 inches. I'm not sure what the centimeter conversion of that is, but like there's cute little fishies. So are there native gobies that they're out competing? Like why are these gobies such a problem?
Yeah, there are native fish that are similar in ecology. They have similar ecologies. The sculpins, there's some sculpin species that have been locally wiped out by the gobies' presence. And they also modify, they're sort of ecosystem engineers a little bit. They burrow or they create nests, which changes habitat. And they're also quite aggressive. They defend those nests quite aggressively. Yeah. And some species in the Great Lakes have switched their feeding towards gobies to such an extent that their morphology has changed. Like trout feed more benthycally to feed on goby, or they feed more at the seabed where the goby are found. And they found that that's correlated with shorter head shape.
Oh, because they're kind of like down in the muck instead of in the water column?
Yeah, exactly. So they don't.
How long have the gobies been here? I mean, how long have they been an invasive species?
Well, 1991 was the initial invasion.
So 1991, 30 years, and morphology of the predators, or like the native predators, is already changing. That's wild to think about.
And the worry is that that could change, where it changes the whole dynamics of the food web. There's also interaction with other invasive species, like the zebra mussel. The gobies eat the zebra mussels, and that is thought to be part of the reason why they're so successful, because they've already adapted to feed on these mussels, whereas native species have not. So
yeah, that's so crazy to think about. So what were you specifically looking at with your PhD?
We were looking at what was driving the successful spread of these species after they had established. So that's why we compared ones that were successful or less successful, with success determined by the speed and the distance that they spread after they were established. So you have the round goby, which spread very quickly over a very great distance, compared to tube-nosed goby, which is much less well-known. It spread over much less distance.
Yeah, so what did you find? Why was one goby more prolific than the other one?
Well, there's obviously a lot of reasons that contribute to this, but my project was focused on the ecology, specifically in terms of what they were eating, and we used stable isotopes to look at that, which indicate specifically carbon and nitrogen stable isotopes. Stable isotopes are variations of an element. They have a different number of neutrons. So the chemistry of the element essentially stays the same, but we can use these variations to trace changes in diet because they change at a predictable way through the food chain or between trophic levels. So large apex predators, they have higher amounts of heavier nitrogen isotopes relative to lighter isotopes. And then the carbon isotope gives us an indication of where they're feeding their habitat. So we use this to look at their ecological niche or their dietary niche. And we found that round goby has a larger and more flexible dietary niche than tube-nosed goby.
Okay, I want to break that down a little bit because stable isotopes still like boggle my mind a little bit. Okay, so bigger the critter, the more carbon they have, the more diversity they have in their diet. That's kind of what you're saying?
So for nitrogen, they have a higher concentration of heavier isotope, which accumulates through the food chain.
Okay, so it's nitrogen that you're looking at.
It's nitrogen. We also look at carbon, which is related to the carbon source is related to different plants, and they can indicate where the fish has been feeding or where what they're feeding on have been.
Okay. All right. So nitrogen is the animals that they're eating, and carbon is the plants that they're eating. And the bigger the critter, the more diverse this traditionally is because they will eat either both or just a bigger quantity.
Essentially, it's all of this, sort of stems from the bottom of the food web and gets traced upwards. And so carbon doesn't change very much as you go through the food web.
Okay.
But so that's why it gives an indication of where they're feeding, because it doesn't change based on what they're feeding on.
Okay.
It changes based on where they're feeding.
Yeah. So the more variation in their diet, the better chance that they had of surviving in these areas?
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense.
And part of this comes down to they have more variety in their habitat specifications, whereas tuberous goby have quite a specific habitat requirement.
Mm-hmm.
We found this with going into the native region, and you had to go to these backwater little tributaries to find tube nose where it was quite shallow. There's a lot of macrophytes or weeds in the water,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the round goby would just be everywhere, essentially.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you graduate your PhD and you're like, I really like fish. And you stayed on to study some more fish. Why did you end up staying in Canada? What kind of prompted that decision a little bit?
Well, I should say I studied invertebrates as well from the PhD. But yeah, fish are definitely where my heart's at from my master's in applied fish biology. But I stuck around because, well, when I finished my PhD, I got offered a position in Nigel Hussey's lab, and he does a lot of exciting research throughout the world on fish ecology, from small forage fish up to large apex predators and marine mammals as well, and a lot of work in the Arctic. And he wanted some help managing field programs because he has a lot of ambitious field programs, and he was just setting up his lab at the time. So I started on and immediately went to this field program in the high Arctic called Tremblay Camp, which was classically called Narwhal Camp.
It's a much more fun name. Narwhal. I want to go Tremblay Camp. I mean, that's a nice name, right? But then you're like, I want to go to Narwhal Camp. Yes, I will go to Narwhal Camp. How long were you at Narwhal Camp for?
Difficult to say no to that, for sure.
Yeah.
It's 6 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, but the year I went transitioned into more of an ecosystem approach. Okay. So it was called Ecosystem Approach Tremblay. Was that the year I went, where we were studying narwhal, but we were also studying as much as we could about what could be connected to the narwhal. We were studying oceanographic parameters. We measured, we collected zooplankton, we did bathymetry surveys, and we tagged fish to track their movements, and sharks.
This is in 2017 when you were tagging like Greenland sharks?
Yeah.
Amazing. What was that like? How do you even catch one to tag it?
So we catch them using long lines.
Okay.
Which are advised against in fisheries now, but
But sometimes science ignores that just to get the data. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you get a pass with science because you're not doing it on a massive scale, right? You're doing it on a small scale, and it's very directed and targeted.
Right. Yeah. And also, you want fisheries long lining. You know, you're trying to kill things. You're trying to catch them to bring them on board to eat them. And scientific long lining, traditionally, you want to tag them and keep them alive. So there's a little bit more vigilance behind scientific long line. You want to keep everything alive that gets on that hook.
Yeah. There's some more rules you have to go by.
Yeah.
So we use these long lines, which is a long line with hooks sequentially along the line and a big weight on either end, and a float line coming to the surface. So we went out to these lines and checked them daily on a small Zodiac inflatable boat. We pulled up the line and checked the hooks, and if there was a shark on the hook, then we would pull the shark along the side of the boat, and we secure the tail of the shark on one end, and we secure the head on the other end with straps around the body, and we invert the shark. So when you invert a shark, they go into what's called tonic immobility, which means they're completely docile. And that's how we perform the tagging without the shark thrashing around.
Yeah, that's so wild. Now, these are all acoustic tags that you're attaching to sharks?
We tag them with acoustic tags, but also these packages of satellite tags and various devices for recording things like acceleration, temperature, conductivity, salt levels in the water.
Did you get all your tags back?
We got most of them back. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, most of them back. There was a tag that ended up in Wales that was someone found on the shore on a beach. And these tags, they have numbers on them. I forget if this was actually from this project, but there's a lot of tagging that Nigel does with his lab in Baffin Bay, in that region in general. So one of the tags ended up there in Wales, and they gave him a call up, and he got it back with the data.
That is so wild to think about. I mean, tag is mind-boggling, right? So, like, I mean, acoustic tags, you're attaching a receiver onto a wild animal in hopes that they are going to go by some acoustic. Well, you're attaching acoustic tag onto a wild animal in hopes that they go by an acoustic receiver close enough for the receiver to hear the tag effectively, right?
Yeah, it's using the same technology that we use for the fish.
So you've deployed these acoustic receivers in the water, and they're able to read the same tags from the fish or the sharks?
Yeah, exactly. And we're able to look at potential interaction between them in terms of proximity. With these sharks, we actually used quite a novel or emerging technology called VMT, which is a mobile transceiver, which is a small receiver and a tag built into it on the animal itself. So then that animal is picking up detections from other fish and sharks as it swims along. Yeah, we have a paper out in the journal Animal Ecology on that as a potential framework for looking at species interaction.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So wait, this tag could pick up, it had to be other tagged animals, right? It wasn't just like an animal swimming by, the other animal had to be tagged?
Yes, yeah, they have to be tagged, and that is part of the caveat of the research. You can't tell if they're swimming past a shark that isn't tagged.
Okay.
And we looked at that potential response from that with accelerometers that were placed on the head of the shark.
That is so cool. Because it kind of paints that picture, right? Like, what is actually going on underneath the water? Like, not just where are they going, but like, who are they seeing?
Right, it is incredibly hard to study that, but the advances in technology right now are very exciting.
Yeah, very cool. So primarily, though, it seems like a lot of your research is revolving around this Arctic sculpin and char. Could you explain a little bit more about like what you're looking at?
Yeah, so one of my main focuses is to look at fish movement, smaller than Greenland sharks, to really fill in data gaps where there's huge data gaps in the Arctic, in coastal regions. There's the kind of baseline information that we have for a lot of places further south. A lot of species further south is just not there for the Arctic. And the Arctic is being impacted so quickly by climate change and receding ice. So you've got increased ship traffic and traffic of people and everything that comes with that. So, and trying to understand how species are responding to that is challenging without that baseline information on where fish are going, what, at different times of year or multi-annual. And that's the beauty of this technology, acoustic telemetry, is that you can track the same individuals over multiple years once you have the equipment in place. So I took the experience I gained from Tremblay Sound and applied it to my own project in the Western Arctic with Nigel Hussey and working with Fisheries and Oceans, Lisa Lozzetto, Fisheries and Oceans, to understand how Arctic char are moving along the marine coast and Greenland cod that are closely related to Atlantic cod and Pacific cod. Where there's little information for where these fish are moving, for Arctic char, how different populations associated with different lakes, how they differentiate in their coastal movements and habitat use, and then apply that to addressing concerns that indigenous communities have for maintaining sustainability of their subsistence harvest catch, and for questions that everybody has in terms of how climate change is going to affect these species and ecosystems.
Yeah. I have a few questions. One, I was just talking with Kate Morrison and with the Ocean Foundation, and she was on a roundtable with different stakeholders, including government, and they had tribal elders with them to help formulate decisions for policymaking and sustainability and fisheries. And one of the things that was brought to the table by the tribal elders is
their definition of sustainability was looking multiple generations into the future, like not just one or two, but like 7 was the number that she threw out. So I was curious if that was kind of like a similar mindset with the tribes that you are interacting with, or that have stakeholders in these areas that you're looking at.
In the Nunavut settlement region, which is where my research is currently based, they are quite proactive in terms of being really cautious about their fisheries for future generations. So I'd say, yeah, at least, I mean, they haven't put a specific number of years for how far they look in the future from conversations I've had, but they definitely are cautious in terms of looking far into the future, trying to maintain the sustainability.
Yeah,
because it's so connected to their livelihood.
Right.
I think it's very difficult for people who haven't been to communities in the Arctic to understand until you've been there, to see how expensive things are in the shops, how unavailable things are a lot of the time, how difficult it is to get the things that are readily available for us further south, and how important it is for people in these communities to have the natural resources that they depend on.
Right. It's something I've been thinking a lot about lately is, indigenous cultures are way more connected to nature than we are. And even, now they've gotten further away because that's how the world has shaped.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's interesting to see like those cultures still exist that are so intricately wound with nature that if something collapses, they're directly impacted by it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And they're being affected more and more all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Interacting with technology now more than ever, which is another interesting aspect.
Yeah. Technology always provides that extra level, right? So it makes things interesting. So what is the difference between a Greenland cod and an Arctic cod? To me, those are just like cold water cods. Is there like a physical difference between them?
Yes, yeah. The Atlantic cod, they grow much larger than the Greenland cod.
Okay.
Which is partly why they're of more interest for fisheries.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Atlantic cod have these huge migrations across, a lot of populations have these huge migrations across the Atlantic. And further into the Arctic now, with climate change in the European Arctic, they're establishing spawning grounds towards higher latitudes. They migrate back to the coasts of Europe for feeding grounds.
This is kind of what your research is looking at, right? Like all the creatures that are liking cold, that require cold water to survive, are moving to higher latitudes, and they're needing to move higher and higher to live in the conditions that they're used to.
Yeah, there's certainly evidence now that a lot of Arctic species are moving towards high latitudes, and then subarctic species like the Atlantic cod, Pacific cod are moving towards high latitudes in their place or overlapping. And how that dynamic is panning out is really a new, very new area. It's happening so quickly that there is limited information for understanding how it will affect coastal ecosystems in general.
Is that something that your research is kind of looking at as you're tagging these fish?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So part of the reason why Greenland cod is, there's evidence to suggest that it is essentially the same species as Pacific cod. Genetically, they're almost identical, but they have different ecologies. So it's kind of unclear how they will interact when they come into more contact, or if they come into more contact, which is becoming increasingly likely.
Maybe they'll create a super species.
Maybe.
That's my hope.
Yeah, or that they just become one species, which is one of the predicted sort of impacts of climate change, is a reduction in complexity.
Right.
I mean, we're living through a biodiversity crash right now, and so we're going to end up with less species. Our ecosystem is going to become less diverse and less interesting, essentially.
Right. Well, and that's the whole thing of it, right? Like biodiversity is the foundation of our natural world, and the less biodiverse, the more susceptible we are to anything, really.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's a fascinating area of research for me, and there's so many different avenues for it as well when interacting with Arctic communities and hearing their perspectives and their questions, because we came into this project with certain questions and we adapted them to address the concerns of the community as well.
So how have your questions changed as you've interacted with these native communities?
So at the beginning of the project, we had meetings with hunters and trappers communities and working groups focusing specifically on Arctic char, because that's the main harvest species for subsistence harvest of fish. Although they harvest Greenland cod as well, it's not as much of a focus. So we went to those meetings, and their questions were associated with understanding more about connectivity between populations of Arctic char and trying to understand the potential impact of fishing in different locations or continuing to fish on one lake population in particular to see how will that affect sustainability long term. And it's challenging to address those questions, but we argued that we could address some of these using tagging work where we're able to see where the fish move along the marine coast, how much overlap there is with the community and where they fish, and how much overlap there is between populations associated with different lakes on the marine coast, to see if they're fishing in one location, are they fishing multiple populations on there, or are they still fishing the same population that they do in the winter in the lakes, which would be a cumulative effect to potentially reduce the overall population abundance below sustainable levels.
Fascinating. It's really interesting work.
It is. It's exciting. I mean, it's just a sort of service of it really as well, because a lot of my focus here is on the fish, but we applied a kind of ecosystem approach as well to this. So to try and understand the drivers of fish movement. So we took an array of oceanographic measurements and habitat surveys and listening devices to hear marine mammals, sampling of the food web, which is all information that has never been done before for this area, never been collected before for this area.
Now, are you going out and collecting all this extra oceanographic information as well, or is this just kind of like part of a lab-wide effort?
I mean, I led the project to collect this information, but it's definitely a lab-wide effort with a lot of people involved.
Okay. So you do get to go out and play the other side of it.
Yes, no, thankfully I did get to do the field work on this one. Several years, and it's some very exciting field programs for sure. Really incredible work.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I have a few questions that I like to ask each guest as we kind of wrap up here. First up, what does the ocean mean to you?
I think it means home to me. It's when I see the ocean, I feel at home. I feel at ease. I feel peace, even if it's crazy, choppy, violent winds over the ocean surface. I just feel at ease because that's what connects me to my childhood, I think. Yeah. And I also feel wonder and amazement because there's so much left to be discovered underneath the waves.
Absolutely. It's an amazing place. If you were given a blank check, unlimited funding, what project would you want to use it for?
Does this surpass political boundaries as well?
Sure. Blank check. I guess it's just
an ideal world.
Yeah, an ideal world. What would you want to make happen?
So I think I would establish a large connected network of monitoring devices. So using similar technology that we've used in these field programs in the Arctic to track fish movements and marine mammals and record oceanographic variables. I would apply it towards an Arctic-wide, at least, array with moorings that are linked together through a hub that can relay the information to satellites or gliders that you deploy. Yeah, so these kind of systems, they can be put in place long term to help us understand impacts in 10, 20 years. We can look back at the information collected now And once the infrastructure's there, it's a lot less work to sort of maintain it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because that is a limitation with acoustic receivers, is that they'll collect, all the data nearby, but you have to go out. My understanding, at least right now, you have to go out and like physically pick up the receiver and download the data from the receiver.
Yeah, exactly. So, but there's advances now that it's leading towards. There are options of remote data collection.
Okay.
Yeah, I think with enough investment, you could push it forward. And I try and get these out in places of the Arctic that are quite understudied, like Russian and Siberian regions, linking them to the Canadian Arctic and the American, European Arctic. If we had a international effort, more of an international effort to understand links between these different regions, I think our capacity to understand impacts on species in these different regions would be much better. Because fish don't recognize international borders, right?
Right. Absolutely. So that was the part of the political boundaries question.
Exactly. That was my question.
Yeah. Yeah, ideal world. So Arctic, you'd still stay in the Arctic. I like it.
Yeah. I'd apply it to the Arctic because it's heavily understudied and it's changing so quickly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. All right, what is your favorite field story or stories to tell? And this could be an amazing day on the field where everything went right and you saw some amazing creatures, or it could be a day where things happened and it makes a really great story now. Or you could do one of each.
It's a tough one. I am fortunate that still early in my career and I've got a lot of fun field stories to choose from. I think the one that resonates with me a lot, or more than anything, is interacting with Narwhal for the first time. And I hate to be that sort of cliche person who's just, Narwhal, they're so fun and exciting. Because
I don't think that's cliche. I don't know how many people have actually interacted with narwhals. So that's pretty awesome.
Right. Yeah, it did not disappoint. And the way we tag them in Tremblay Camp is we catch them in a big net on the shore, and then we bring them into closer to the shore. So they're still in the water, but we can interact and we can put a tag on their back. But this requires quite a lot of effort from a lot of people involved, not so many around the animal, but I was fortunate to be able to get close to the animal, and looking down and seeing the eye of this creature just look back at you is an incredible experience. And I always find that an incredible experience, whether it's a tiny crab or a huge whale. But I think narwhal, because of they are, a lot of people still think they're a mythical creature. When I talk to people about them, they still don't believe me that they exist. So in some cases.
You know what? One of my really good friends falls in that category. And I'm like, of course they exist. And he's just not convinced. So I think it's very funny.
But it's just a very humbling experience to be in the presence of a creature like that, and to see them go off with the tag that we put on them, and then to hear about that data coming back. It's pretty special.
That is so cool. How many narwhals did you tag for that project?
That year we tagged, I think it was around 15.
Okay.
Yeah, which is less than normal. A few less than they would normally, I think.
Okay.
But that year we ramped up and did everything else. So we also tagged 30 sharks and 30 of each different species of fish, and yeah, there was a lot going on.
A lot of tagging happening.
Yes.
Okay, so you had significantly different tagging methods between narwhal with a net and on shore, and then long lining with these Greenland sharks. Now, do you catch your fish just hook and line?
Yeah, some of them we did.
Okay.
We did catch some of them angling, but we also used fike nets to catch some of the small forage fish, the sculpins.
Okay.
And we used gill nets to catch a lot of the char as well.
Okay. Interesting.
Lots of different methods.
Was one more effective than the other?
Fike nets are incredible. That they're so good at catching a huge diversity of species of the little forage fish, but they're not so great at catching the bigger fish that are more transient, like Arctic char. And so each of the methods, I think, is quite well suited for the different species. Sculpins for fyke nets and gill nets for char.
You're saying fyke net?
Fyke net, yeah, Fyke.
I don't think I've heard of that. Can you describe it?
Yeah, they consist of several square, I think you can get them circular as well, frames connected together by a sort of tube-like net. And then they have those frames separate out compartments that the fish swim into, and then they can't swim back out of. So they end up in a cod end, or they end up in the tail of the net altogether.
Okay. Kind of like a bigger version of like a plankton net or something.
Yeah, exactly. You have to check them quite frequently because all the fish are sort of end up in the end of the net together.
Right. Packed in like, I would say sardines, but these are fish.
Sardines if you leave it sit for too long.
That's funny. So at the end of each episode, I like to leave the audience a conservation ask to go forth and bring to the world. What would you like the audience to take from your episode today?
It's not related to what I've been doing, but I'd say go and watch David Attenborough's A Life on Our Planet. I watched it this weekend, and it's hugely inspiring, and really it describes a lot of the things that I'm passionate for, and a lot of the reasoning behind my research, why I do it, and why climate change is so crucial for everybody to get on board with and understand the effects of, and support research that is trying to further our understanding of the impacts of climate change.
I love it.
And in that documentary, they also talk about links with indigenous tribes, groups. And that's my follow-up ask, is to watch that and then think about how the indigenous groups in your area or your country, how they interact with nature and what we can learn from that.
Great ask. I love it. If listeners want to find you, connect with you, learn more about you and your research, where's the best place to do so?
I'd say you could go to hussylab.com, where there's a lot of information about the different kind of research I've been talking about today. Or you could follow me on Instagram, which is Pettitt-Wade Biologist, or Twitter, Harri PW. And that's where I'll be sharing updates on papers that are coming out and information on the research projects I'm working on right now.
Perfect. And I'll put a link to those recommendations as well as everything we chatted about today in the show notes. Harri, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be on. I really appreciate being invited. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure.
Hey, do you want to help the oceans? Have you considered a career in marine biology, but maybe just aren't sure where to start? Head on over to my website, marinebio.life, and subscribe to my newsletter. When you subscribe, you'll receive a free PDF download where you'll learn the 7 steps to becoming a marine biologist without the degree. Thank you for listening to today's show. I'd love to hear any insight you've gleaned. Leave a comment in the show notes or send me an email over at marinebio.life. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a review and of course, share with your friends. If you want more resources for ocean news, including conservation topics and careers, plus personal insight from me that I just don't share anywhere else, join me at marinebio.life and sign up for email updates. Keep after your dreams and making waves in your community. One person can make a difference. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time on the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast.